Before the machines came, a man's hands were everything. In the textile towns of England in 1811, a skilled framework knitter could earn enough to feed his family, to own his tools, to pass his craft to his sons. It took years to learn the trade. Some men spent a decade learning how to work a hand loom properly. The work was hard, the hours were long, but the skill was theirs. Nobody could take that from them. Or so they thought. The towns of Nottingham, Sheffield, Leeds, Halifax, these were not just places. They were communities built entirely around craft, around the knowledge passed from father to son, around the dignity of skilled work. Every family in these towns knew what the father did, knew what the son would do, knew what the grandson after him would do. That certainty was about to be destroyed. Not by a war, not by a plague, not by any act of God or nature, by a machine. The power loom had existed in various forms since the 1780s, but by 1811, factory owners in the English Midlands had refined it, perfected it, deployed it at scale. One power loom could produce what 10 skilled hand weavers produced, at a fraction of the cost, with none of the wages, with none of the complaints, with none of the demands. Factory owners did not hesitate. They bought the machines. They filled their mills with them, row after row after row. And then they told their workers that their services were no longer required. Men who had worked the same loom for 20 years were handed nothing. No warning, no payment, no acknowledgement that their years of skill had ever meant anything at all. And in the streets outside the mills, men who had been craftsmen yesterday were poor today. It began in Nottingham. On the night of the 11th of March, 1811, a group of men gathered in the darkness. They did not gather randomly. They had a plan. They had a leader. And they had hammers. They called their leader General Ludd. Some said he was a real man, a weaver named Ned Ludd from Leicestershire, who had smashed 2 stocking frames in a rage years before. Others said General Ludd was not a man at all. He was an idea, a symbol, a name that could not be arrested, a leader that could not be hanged. That first night in Nottingham, the men moved quickly and quietly through the streets. They broke through the doors, and they went straight for the looms. The hammers came down, again and again, until the machines were splinters and iron. 60 looms destroyed in a single night. Then they disappeared back into the darkness, back into the houses, back into the community that sheltered them. By morning, nobody had seen anything. Nobody knew anything. Nobody had a name to give the authorities. What happened in Nottingham that night was not an act of blind rage. The Luddites were organized. They operated like a military unit. Night raids only, specific targets chosen in advance, lookouts posted on the roads. They communicated by letters, signed in the name of General Ludd. The letters were delivered to factory owners. Remove the machines. Reinstate the workers. Pay fair wages, or we will come back. The movement spread from Nottingham into Yorkshire and Lancashire. Now the Luddites had numbers across 3 counties. Hundreds of men, possibly thousands. The authorities had no idea who they were. They moved at night. They left no witnesses. They protected each other with silence. For months, the machines kept breaking, and General Ludd remained a ghost. By early 1812, the British government was alarmed. This was not simple vandalism. This was organized resistance, and it was spreading. Prime Minister Spencer Perceval deployed 12,000 soldiers to the affected counties. 12,000 soldiers to suppress textile workers in the English Midlands. At the same moment, Britain was fighting Napoleon across Europe, and there were fewer British soldiers on the continent than there were hunting Luddites in Nottingham and Yorkshire. Parliament passed the Frame Breaking Act. Machine breaking was now punishable by death. Not imprisonment, not transportation. Death. Lord Byron stood up in the House of Lords and argued against the bill. He told Parliament that these men were not criminals. They were desperate. They were starving. They were men with families who had lost everything to a machine that Parliament had done nothing to regulate. Parliament passed the bill anyway. Factory owners began arming their mills. Guards were posted at night. In April 1812, Luddites attacked Rawfolds Mill in Yorkshire. The mill owner had prepared. His guards opened fire. 2 Luddites were shot and killed. The rest retreated into the darkness. The rebellion had drawn blood on both sides. The government needed names. Spies were sent into the textile communities. Informers were paid. Rewards were offered to anyone who would identify a Luddite. The communities held. For months they held. But money is a powerful thing, and poverty is a more powerful thing still. Names began to surface, quietly, in letters delivered to magistrates at night, in whispered conversations with constables. Men who had been weavers and croppers their whole lives were taken from their homes, in front of their wives, in front of their children. The trials were held in York. January 1813. 65 men stood trial. The evidence against many of them came entirely from paid informers. 17 men were hanged. Not for violence, not for murder, for breaking machines. They were hanged in groups, outside York Castle, in public, so that every textile worker in England would know what resistance cost. Another 14 men were transported to Australia, sent to the other side of the world for the crime of trying to save their livelihoods. After the hangings, the Luddite rebellion broke. The machines kept running. Nobody stopped them. Nobody regulated them. Nobody asked what would happen to the hundreds of thousands of skilled workers whose livelihoods they had consumed. Within a generation, the craft traditions that had sustained entire regions of England for centuries were gone. The hand-loom weavers, the framework knitters, the croppers, replaced by unskilled factory workers, including children, working 14-hour days for wages that kept them alive, but nothing more. The factory owners grew rich, and the men who had fought to stop it were remembered as vandals, as criminals, as people who stood in the way of progress. History called them Luddites, and made the word mean foolish. But what they actually were was people who saw what was coming, and were right about all of it. Every generation has its machines. Every generation has its moment when something new arrives, and the people who built their lives on the old way are told to simply adapt. The Luddites of 1811 were not afraid of technology. They were afraid of what technology, in the hands of the powerful, does to the powerless. 200 years later, that fear has a different name, but it is the same fear. The hammers are gone. The mills are museums now. The men who swung those hammers have no graves that anyone visits. But the question they were asking in the darkness of those Nottingham nights is still being asked today. Who does the future belong to? The machine or the man?